I've always been interested in the European Union. I think there was a personal dimension to it. I partially grew up in Brussels. I was introduced, socialized into thinking about the EU quite early on. The European Union is a fascinating polity to study. It's highly complex, it's very divided. It's about decision-making and accommodation and negotiation between people, negotiators from very different backgrounds, cultural, ideological, social, political, and national, of course. And I find it really interesting to see how these different actors, individual, institutional, come together, reach agreements, and how you can arrive at this legitimate governance beyond the nation state. Part of why the European Union is interesting is because it is unique. So I don't necessarily think the European Union is just an international organization dealing with a particular functionalist range of policies related to the single market. I think the European Union is much more than that. And I think the European Parliament is possibly the best expression of this. Right? It's a directly elected majoritarian institution outside the nation state. Whether the students get the system and its complexity really depends where they are from. And if you're from the UK, if you're used to a parliament where there's the government facing the opposition, where it's about public confrontation, right? Where it's about political point scoring in the open, you will really struggle with the European system. If you come from the US, if you come from Germany, if you come from Switzerland, you will find it much more normal that compromise is something on which politics is based. In my work in general, I'm interested in sort of the everyday negotiations, the everyday politics, and in the informal processes behind political decisions. In and of itself, that's not new in the European Union. I mean, if you deal with a highly complex, highly divided system with actors from 28 member states, plus the European Parliament, plus the Commission, you will never be able to reach all decisions in the formal arena. And I mean, Brussels is notorious for its corridor deals. The co-decision procedure under which the European Parliament and the Council of Ministers need to agree to pass a law can only take one reading. Right? So you can fast-track legislation by passing it after one reading already. Now, if you want to do that, you can only do that if decisions are pre-negotiated. Informalization occurs across all legislation, no matter whether it's highly technical or whether it's highly salient. How you evaluate this process really depends on your standards, right? Whether you're interested more in efficiency, whether you think informal spaces are important for actors to accommodate each other, right? Or whether you think, well, if you talk about democracy, it's got to be open, it's got to be transparent, it's got to be about public deliberation. But whatever you do, even on this informal arena, even with fast-track legislation, you have to take your institutions with you, right? So you as the negotiator of the Council, you have to take the Council of 28 with you. You as the negotiator for the European Parliament, you have to take the coalition in the European Parliament with you. You can't just go there and strike a deal, which is one more reason for why I do find it democratically challenging in view of transparency and openness. But why I think when we look at policy outcomes, it's probably less problematic than we think. If you look at reporting about the EU, studies of the EU is always in crisis, right? The European project has allegedly been dead so many times. And I think the European Union has usually come out of its crisis strengthened. So let's hope it works like this time around as well. If you ask me whether it is difficult to study the European Union in the current British climate, I do think it is challenging and it is not always uplifting. But I do hope that good debate or good arguments can inform the debate.